Hi guys, so today we're going to talk a little bit about posture. Postural considerations matter when we're dealing with any kind of weight, loading, technique, right? So your posture matters. How we move depends on whether or not we're going to have pain, whether or not that inert tissue actually impinges that movement. A lot of times it's just a repositioning of your inert tissue, or your hard stuff, your bones, into a position in which they move very well. So I can do an overhead motion very well if my thoracic extension and external rotation allows me to do this, right? So if I'm hunched forward and rotated in from the shoulder, which from the front kind of looks like this. We have knuckles facing us, our shoulders are in. A lot of times we'll have an indentation here between the shoulder and the chest, right? This is a kyphotic curve, what NASM would call a upper cross syndrome, right? So we're coming down and we're crossing in this way, so it's the upper cross syndrome. Whether or not you believe that's a real shit, I don't really care. But if we are locked down in this position, two things that we cannot do well is pull back, stand up, or do any kind of overhead pressing. Because guess what? If we're locked down and we try to do this, we're restricted. We're not just restricted by muscle tension and length tension relationship across the joint. It can be coming from the chest, it can be coming from the lats, especially with this overhead restriction. But a lot of the times what I see is not really even muscle restriction, it's just improper joint positioning in order to do that range of motion. So if I'm hunched and forwarded like this and I try to raise my arm, guess what? That's about all I got. It's only gonna go this far, because then we hit this. For this to roll out and actually do any more, we have to be freed up down here. Okay? So if we can't shrug or move in this direction, then usually it's just really if it's not tight in the muscle and we're not having restrictions there, it's the bony positioning. So from here, I'm only gonna get this much range because then I get a pinch. If I externally rotate using the rotator cuffs, but I'm still in kyphosis, I'm gonna get a little bit more of a better range, but still not great. Okay? For me to get full overhead range, I have to actually stand up. Externally rotate, and then we have nice overhead reach with little to no shoulder impingement. Okay? So, we have this S curve in our spine. We don't want it to be compressed, fat S curve where it's just really, really squatty and these big turns. What happens when we have a big turn in the spine like that, at the skin level, we start to get creasing, right? So if you have a creasing in your neck here, or especially creasing in the lumbar spine, this is because we hunch forward and look up, and now I have this big crease in the back of my neck. These are indicators that we have a squished and compressed S, right? Same thing in the lumbar spine here. If we have a drastic arch or anterior tilt, we get not necessarily creasing. If you have a lot of extra weight, you'll get creasing right above the pelvis, right at the low back. But that also gives us a weak lower belly that just hangs forward like this and drops down. Okay? So the key for posture is to take this short fat S that does this big switchback and push it together this way. Okay? So wherever there's a natural curve, we kind of want to fight against that and compress it this way so that it elongates, not so that it's compressed and big, right? So at the chest, if we're hunching over this way, we need to actually lift the chest up. This comes from your lower trapezius and mid-thoracic extension. So basically, we're just focused on the rib cage, turning the rib cage up without doing anything from the ribs down. Okay? So from here, that's going to look a little bit like that. And for a lot of people, when we want you to stand up, you're unable to extend here, and so we arch low, and that puts tension in the low back. Okay, so we want to maintain. Let me take my shirt off for a second so you can everybody see my fat rolls. Okay, so this is a bad posture. We got the gut hanging and everything's bad. So here we want to actually extend the hips, and that kind of rotates the pelvis this way a little bit. And then right here from the belly, we want to pull in and up. And then we want to take this crunch out of our posture because this is hunching us down. So we want to tighten all this up here. And then, like I said, just from the rib cage, lift up. And that actually draws this in more so that it has a much flatter appearance. And then the rib cage is flat. So we don't want to have large discrepancies between collars. That should be relatively flat. If we have one side that looks higher, it may not be from shrugging like most people would think. It can actually come from internally rotating and causing a forward tilt in the shoulder blade, right? So our external rotation and lower trapezius muscles will help tilt that back so that it's flat, protecting the lungs. Okay, so sometimes we see an elevated shoulder. It's actually not an elevated shoulder, it's just rotated in the wrong position. So we could be doing this, but most of the time it's just this. And so most of the time when I come into bench press, squat, all of these different movement patterns, you can actually see it. So when we're pulling in on the squat bar and it's on our neck, and one arm is lifted this way more and the other one is down, and then we start tilting and all these different things. Okay, so internally and externally rotating matters, right? So pay attention to symmetry and rotation. So sometimes, like I said, that kind of thing is just off balance. So for me, my external rotation on this side is a lot stronger because of the rehab work that I was doing, because I injured my shoulders. Now it's too strong this way. So when I'm in a bench or a pull, actually I have to just kind of let this side relax a little bit more while I really hard effort on the external rotation on the left side. So if you're bench pressing and you're doing this, even that out. We're gonna keep that straight. So if this side is hitting and rotating out really extra hard, we're gonna hit this side hard and let this side relax, and we're gonna just go together. Same thing with press or any kind of movement, and we're starting to like have one side. I see this all the time on the Instagram. One side stronger than the other. Be adherent to your technique and symmetry, and slow the other side down and press up and in together. Right? So when we're breaking that bar down, it's not just a rotation and a press. You're still going to be in your triceps and your shoulder. If we're not pushing down and also squeezing together, this is what activates the chest. You're throwing the weight from your ribs here, just under your chest. So you don't want to be flared out like this in a press, because then we're going to be all up in the shoulder, internally rotating this way, causing shoulder impingement that comes with a little bit of shrug. We want to rotate all down the other way and squeeze the bar down this way and in. So even though we're on a flat bar, rotating down this way is going to cause my elbow to go from facing out to facing down, and I'm still going to be pronated in the wrist and forearm, but I'm rotating externally in the humerus, which is engaged all this. Then when we pull back, this is where we get maximal stretch in the chest, but staying out of the shoulder. If we come this way, you're getting stretch in the chest and shoulder, a lot more in the shoulder, but we run into a possible impingement here in the rotator cuff coming back. Okay, so stretch, stretch, stretch this way, real deep stretch, squeeze the core, and then press out hard from here. So once you squeeze that, then the joint becomes stable and we push it out with force. You're priming that muscle to do the work. We're keeping the joint stable by making it tight intentionally. Remember that a sudden onset or any kind of jerking move with a weight can cause damage to the connective tissue. Okay? So we want ligaments and tendons to stay nice and strong and functional, and we want to stimulate the muscle. Okay? So give that intentional flex before we hit it hard, and then that should all stay really stable. Okay? But again, with the posture, so we want to make sure that our posture, our pelvis is flattened out. So we don't want to be arching this way. We don't want to be tucked this way. A lot of people, when they tuck their pelvis, they also are tight, so in the hips, so they can't do that without also bending the knees. So we get this kind of posture going on. Okay, so we want to tilt the pelvis, make sure the knees can straighten out, push the hips forward so that we're actually on top of ourselves. And when we tilt this way a little bit, it comes with a little bit of gluteal engagement that lengthens the lumbar spine. It comes with tightening in the core here, pulling this in, which also pulls up on the front side of the pelvis and keeping this flat. Okay? From here, we want to keep this nice and tight, and we're just going to rotate the rib cage from there. We don't want to overdo it to the point where we're having a lot of stress in the back, just to a point where it's comfortably flat and we can relax our shoulders without having a lot of pain and tension throughout here. A lot of times if we're having pain and tension through here, it's actually because we're overdoing the rotation and all this pullback instead of lifting from the core here. Okay, so tighten that up, use your glutes, use your abdominal muscles, lift your chest. Okay, lat spread is actually from pushing, it's not a pulling motion. Okay, we're winging and pushing forward with the serratus anterior. Okay, but ultimately we're squeezing that S this way. Okay, so we have a natural curve in the lumbar, so we push against it from the stomach. We have a natural rounding in the chest, so we pull with the back, but ultimately we're pushing the sternum up. Right, so we're pushing in, we're pushing up, and this fixes a lot of our posture. If we have internal rotation this way, we don't want to do all this. We just want to rotate out, and we don't want to rotate out from the hands. or the wrists or the elbows, we're going to rotate out from the humerus, and that's all that looks like. It doesn't take a lot. And then if our hands are still forward this direction, it's actually just to pull back this way, not all this breaking open the back, okay, or breaking open the chest by pulling back. This creates a lot of tension in your rhomboids and doesn't actually do what we want, okay? So brace your core in real good. Rotate the humerus only. And then just pull back to where your hands rest comfortably facing your hips, okay? And if we don't neglect how we grip the ground, then all this in the legs and hips come to match. And then this goes into learning how to pose and doing your bodybuilding poses. And I'm kind of fat and out of shape right now. Back injury kind of laid me up for a minute. I'm doing a cut right now. But keeping your core right and your posture right actually will help reduce low back pain, because then we won't be arching like this and our belly won't be hanging over like this. We're going to pull this all back into place, and there we go. Okay, so I hope that helps. Give me 8 weeks, I'll be a lot trimmer. We're doing the transformation challenge. Hope you get on. Hit us up for the link. Get on the app.